Hey YouTube, today I'm going to talk to you about David Bowie.
I have a picture of him with a big old dog here on my wall, wearing a shirt right now.
Obviously I have the mugshot canvas downstairs above the couch. And that's all because David Bowie is the greatest musician to ever grace this planet, while not necessarily being born here. If you don't know who David Bowie is, or you only know him from one or two songs like Let's Dance or Changes, you are missing out on the greatest reason to be a living human being. Because David Bowie is more than just a musician, he is an innovator. He's in the vanguard of music, fashion, and sexuality. I've been obsessed with David Bowie since high school. I actually got into him from The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, because if you're a fan of that movie, you know that the entire soundtrack is acoustic covers of his songs sung in Portuguese by Seu Jorge, I don't know how to say it. But that was one of my favorite movies because I'm a huge Wes Anderson fan, and I looked into that music and discovered a man who was perfect. He's perfect. Back then, when I found a new artist, I would listen to each album they made in the order that they released them. I still like doing that, I just don't really have the time, especially when an artist has such a huge discography. But as I listened to each subsequent album, I was dumbfounded by how different each one was and yet how amazing they all were. You see, David Bowie has released 26 albums over the course of 46 years and has moved in and out of so many musical styles, often being one of the first artists to do some of the stuff that he's done. I'll do a quick run through of all his albums for you because that's how obsessed with David Bowie I am. I know them all. 1967, David Bowie. This was kind of like a folk album, and he's really nothing like anything that would come after it. It's got some joke songs. It's kind of embarrassing, and I don't even listen to it that often, but it's fun to be like, oh wow, that's David Bowie. 1969, Space Oddity, also known as David Bowie sometimes. This was when he started to develop his own style, his own outlook in his music, and of course it has the smash hit Space Oddity, which played in the UK when humans landed on the fucking moon. Yeah, that's like the single biggest accomplishment of our species, and you know who scored it for the UK? David fucking Bowie, who, at the time, was only 22 years old? 1970, The Man Who Sold the World. I fucking love this album. It was maybe my favorite way back in high school, because it's like a hard rock album. It's got the title song, The Man Who Sold the World, which you may know by the Nirvana cover. It also has this fucking 8-minute epic called The Width of a Circle that for a while was my favorite fucking song. 1971, Hunky, Dory. This is an awesome kind of more popish album. It's kind of eclectic. It's got a lot of different sounds in it. As far as oh wow, every song on this album is amazing, which is the case for most of them, but Hunky Dory is one of the best ones because it's got Changes, it's got Life on Mars, which is maybe the best song ever made. It's got Queen Bitch, wow. Get more glam than that, you can't. Obviously 1972's The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars is near perfection from start to finish. It is just, every song is amazing. It's one of the earliest concept albums, although, it wasn't that much of a concept, but it does kind of tell a story with its songs, which is cool and innovative. I think he got the idea from Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club's Band, which, of course, is another amazing album. Every single song on this album is great. Every year on David Bowie's birthday, I listen to this album start to finish on headphones. Shout out to Moonage Daydream, which is maybe my favorite song. Oh no, I'm sorry, it's not my favorite song of the album, because there's Rock and Roll Suicide, which, if you want to cry listening to a song, just listen to that. And the fact that it's the last song on this 40-minute epic, 1973 Aladdin Sane, David Bowie getting a little weirder, having some jazz shit in there. Not really jazz, but crazy piano stuff. In fact, in Aladdin Sane, that super long piano solo, that's one of the coolest things you'll ever hear played on piano. Drivin' Saturday is another phenomenal song. And if you want, more upbeat, single type material, you got Genie on there, so that's cool. It's another great, okay, the 70s, I'll have you know, David Bowie, every single album is near perfect. From Man Who Sold the World all the way up into 1980's Scary Monsters, everything is fucking perfect. Except maybe 1973's Pinups, but that's like a cover album. It's just an album of him covering other songs, and it's got some weird shit on there like Emily Plays, which was a Pink Floyd song, but it also has Sorrow, and Sorrow is fucking awesome. Also, the cover's really cool because it's got Twiggy. 1974's Diamond Dogs is another concept album where he moved away from the Ziggy Stardust character that he had created for the previous albums and was basically Aladdin Sane, and became Halloween Jack, some dude with like an eye patch. So that was fucking freaky Bowie. Diamond Dogs is cool because it's got like this weird disco tinge to it, especially because they're inspired by George Orwell's 1984. So you get like an album full of this weird kind of art-ish rock, including like this Sweet Thing reprise, Sweet Thing, awesome suite about like a guy and his young lover, who's also a guy because it's Bowie. But then the last couple of songs are these disco Orwellian songs, including 1984 and Big Brother. Plus, if you want a single, you got Rebel Rebel, which, whatever. 1975, Young Americans. He is in full-on funk and soul mode here. He calls it plastic soul because, you know, he knows that it's not real soul, but it sounds just as good. And this album is cool because it's got Luther Vandross chilling on Fascination, and John Lennon shows up to sing the background vocals in Fame. He also was there, and I think he asked Bowie to cover Across the Universe, and like, it's a very Bowie cover. Is what's us singing? It's just Bowie is like giving it his whole Bowie vocals. 1976 is Station to Station, which is maybe his best album. It competes with like one or two others as his best as far as like musical innovation goes. It's only got 6 tracks on it. 4 of them are longer than 6 minutes. It's another very soulful album, kind of like Young Americans. But by this time, he had created this character called the Thin White Duke, which had some like weird fascist undertones, but it's also interesting because he doesn't really remember this part of his life. He was living in LA, which really affected him, and he was just strung out on cocaine the entire time. He doesn't even remember recording this album. His diet reportedly consisted of cocaine, red peppers, and milk. And he got like super paranoid during this time and like into the occult and Aleister Crowley. Like, that's what's so interesting about Bowie, is you get a sense that here was this guy who, because of his talent, could do anything he wanted. And the things that he wanted to do, he chose to do in the most extreme way possible for a little bit. And then he would just pull back out of it and be like, okay, time to try something else. But this phase was definitely just Bowie abusing himself, and it created like one of the best albums of all time, so I don't know what that means. And like I said, he pulled back completely for 1977's Low, which along with the 2 subsequent albums are called the Berlin Trilogy. He went to Berlin to record these, I think just 2 of the 3, and completely like dried himself out from drugs and all that crazy shit, and he worked with Brian Eno, who, if you know music, you know that Brian Eno's fucking weird, so you put him and Bowie together, and you get Low, which is another contender for his best album. I think Low and Station to Station are probably the 2, like, top 2 contenders, generally agreed upon. Low's cool because the B-side is all these instrumentals, and honestly, it took me years to appreciate them. The first, I don't think, even throughout college, I just would skip these songs. But, I mean, now I listen to them and I get them. I feel them. I probably don't get them, but they're familiar enough at this point that I like them, so that's cool. Whoo boy, probably gotta speed this up a little bit. Okay, 77 was also Heroes, and then 79 was Lodger, and those were the other 2 albums in the Berlin Trilogy, both also amazing. Heroes has more instrumentals, Lodger does not. I mean, they and Low are pretty much cut from the same cloth, that's why they're considered a trilogy. But Low, just the songs happen to hit better. I do find myself singing Sons of the Silent Age from Heroes, which is a weird song to just break into, but something will remind me of it and I'll sing it. Also, Lodger has DJ and Boys Keep Swinging, which I find just really funny songs, and they're fun to listen to.
Guys, it's too much Bowie. I'm sorry, I started editing this and it's just way too much Bowie. I have Game of Thrones to watch, I can't do this. So we're just gonna cap it off with the end of Lodger, because that's 1979, and tomorrow I'll present to you Bowie in the 80s and onward. I'm sorry I couldn't finish it. It's fucking Bowie. He's a behemoth.